It's important to talk about, the disease of addiction. Also, I've been asked to talk about myself a little bit more personally today. I don't usually do that. That's not my go-to thing. Oftentimes, I'm more of an educator. My name is Raj Mehta. I'm a licensed therapist with the state of Michigan, master's level. I consider myself, licensed to kill addiction on site. Addiction has affected my life personally, has affected my friends personally, and my family as well. And because of that, it's when I do an open talk like that, it opens some wounds. You know what I mean? Because I have severe PTSD from what I've seen and had to be part of. And because of that, it's kind of changed me in different ways. But I think that, oftentimes hurt people can help people. Because when I meet with somebody the first time or second time or 10th time, and we begin having a discussion about what they're going through or what they've been, and instead of them pulling out the card, well, you've never felt like this, so you don't understand what that's like, you don't have to play that game back and forth. The moms love the fact that I went to U of M and I graduated with a 4.0. That makes the moms really happy. But the people that come to see me, they're actually using drugs, prefer my street credibility and my knowledge of how drugs are in the drug world is. If it makes any sense. So I got both sides covered. I got the street knowledge, I'm very streetwise, and I also have the academic side as well. And so hopefully that brings more to the table when it comes to me helping people. Besides just being a therapist, I'm also a musician, I'm a songwriter, I'm an author. I've written a book on addiction that helps lots of people. Oftentimes I'll send that book to a person that's in jail or in prison. The goal is to give the books away and help other people. The book has been sent to many different jails and prisons throughout the U.S., and one of the best compliments I've ever gotten was a person that said, wrote me back from prison, a level 2 prison, and said, I've never written a book from cover to cover. I've never read a book from cover to cover. It's the first one I ever read from cover to cover. And so how the book came about was that I was working at Eastwood Clinic as a volunteer. And you guys know about the Hazleton literature. It's very standardized, the safe Hazleton, like acceptance today is the best way forward. And if you don't really have that kind of feeling in your heart and you're going through withdrawals, you may not want to read that Hazleton stuff. So I'm passing out handouts to different people. And one of these guys who's in Eastwood Clinic, who was there for drug court, he's probably did about 5 years in prison, throws it back at me and goes, I'm not reading this nonsense. And I'm like, okay, I could jump and say, I'm the therapist, you do what I want, but that's not my style. So I ask him, why not? He goes, first of all, I don't understand it, and second of all, there's no pictures in it. I got a reading disability. So I'm like, okay, bet. I go, how about this? How about if I begin to write some handouts? Would that be helpful for you? He goes, yeah, if you read it, I'll write it. If you write it, I'll read it. So I began writing these handouts and putting together some information. And then later on down the line, one of my close friends died of a heroin overdose. So when Jerry died of an overdose, his wife Kimmy was using with him. They lied to me about that. And she was pregnant. So I had to bury my friend, take my close female friend to a NA meeting and get her sober while she was pregnant. Very, very stressful. Went through a lot of Kleenexes, a lot of tissues, and we cried along the way. The good part of the story is that Kimmy has never used since then. I'm the godfather to their child. So that being said, it became very personal to me. This addiction killed my close friend and made this baby basically an orphan, and I felt the gloves were off. So I'm going to write an entire book on addiction that helps people. And so I got 2 copies up here that I'm going to give away if anybody wants them. So besides doing that, one of the guys I got off of heroin, his father is a patent attorney. And so I got his son off of heroin. He was so happy. He goes, what can I do for you? And I go, well, hey, I got this idea about these drug-free fists and his fortune favors the bold. Can you trademark this for me? He's like, sure. So we ended up doing is we put together a trademark and these drug-free fists. And the purpose is, I do lots of presentations, as you can imagine, right? And you guys understand how marketing works. Drugs and alcohol market themselves really, really well. And in fact, drug dealers don't need to market their stuff at all. Cocaine sells itself, and so does heroin. No marketing required, no advertising at all. But if you're trying to promote sobriety, right, that's a hell of a job. Imagine you go into a high school or a college, or how about a bunch of 8th graders, 300 of them in a room, right? And you got 1 hour to convince these kids that drugs and alcohol are bad and sobriety is really good. So you got to have something cool. And of course, everybody loves the brand Supreme, right? Come on. All these kids love Supreme. So my thing, I made some baseball caps. I actually have kids in high school wearing these baseball caps, 2-class, drug-free Supreme on the side. That's pretty cool, right? All right. So does anybody like a flex fit small medium baseball cap? All right. How about this? I even got a drug-free pillow. Come on. You put your head on this, you have wonderful recovery dreams, right? Come on. So the drug-free pillow goes to my man right here. He's awesome. And we're going to have some of these hats over here, so let's toss them out. You guys pass them along, okay? And we got some t-shirts too, right? So however it gets divided up, everybody, shirts. So what's the purpose of all this, right? Why do we do all this? You know, why do we give all this stuff away, right? The idea is to help people. That's the reason why. And it makes sobriety really cool. Is that making sense? So with that being said, obviously my personal story, how this kind of went down, I was in a lot of rock bands and I was very happy with making music. And we had a great band, very talented people. And at one point, we're about to get to a record deal. And my drummer, Tim, decides to commit suicide. My girlfriend comes to me and says I'm pregnant. And now I'm dealing with all this and no record deal. I'm about to go to college. All my plans in life have changed upside down. And a little background on me, I have an extensive juvenile record, but I have no adult record at all. So I've already been in Children's Village at this time for drug dealing, all that kind of stuff. And so what happens is I began getting really angry at the world, like really, really angry. And I began hanging out with my drug dealing friends from the old days at Powerhouse Gym back in Highland Park. And so my friends were actually very, very crazy and very, very violent. And so I began hanging out with them and doing cocaine and snorting it and getting back into drug dealing. And at one point, I was getting a little bit big, and there were two drug dealers that wanted to make a connection, right? And so what usually happens if you want to be the drug dealer, you don't want to have two people meet together, you want to be the guy in between, you make a lot of dough. But I got really uncomfortable about this because of my experience in Children's Village, and I realized no matter how good I am at selling drugs, there's always somebody really dumb that's going to buy them from me and tell on me, right? So I didn't want to get this big. So I had a big meeting at my house. You know, this Porsche pulls up and this Mercedes pulls up, and then there's a Ferrari over there. It looks really weird in a suburban house. And these guys come to meet in my bedroom, and I'm having this introduction. Everybody shakes hands. Everybody gets to know each other. Everybody's happy. I think it's beautiful. So my Lebanese friend Steve looks at me and goes, "What do you want for this deal?" And I go, "Nothing, Steve. I don't want anything at all." He goes, "That's a problem with you. You don't want anything." I go, "Steve, I don't want anything out of this deal. You guys are hooked up. You're going to make a small fortune." No, he goes, "Here's the thing. You get high for free the rest of your life." What? You get high for free the rest of your life. Now, you tell me that at my age right now, that's really bad and that's really stupid. When I was 19 years old, what do you think I thought? I just died and went to heaven, right? So within the first month was my first cocaine overdose to the hospital from shooting cocaine, right? Then I had a second overdose a month later, and then I started doing heroin. So in 3 months, I had 3 overdoses, already going to the hospital, and I was absolutely reckless. So I don't want to get involved in a drug-a-log, because when I talk about my addiction and active addiction stuff, it becomes a despicable discourse. It's a thing you don't really want to talk about because it makes you dirty, but I also want to talk about it so it allows you to identify with how crazy drugs can get. So because we're doing all these drugs for free, my friend and I, Steve, the major drug dealer, decided to have some fun with this. So we go to parties, everyone's doing normal stuff like doing lines and drinking. We pull out our syringes and a pulsometer. People are like, "What are they doing with a pulsometer and a syringe?" Because we're going to have a little game. You know, similar to Russian roulette. You shoot some cocaine, I shoot some cocaine. Let's start with our starting heart rate. Let's see how high we can get our heart rate up to. I went to 212 beats per minute. Steve went to 220. That's not good. Fast forward 10 years later, Steve needed a heart transplant. I damaged my heart from that stupid stuff. That's not good, right? On top of that, because we're doing so much IV drug usage, right, it becomes a problem to constantly put needles in your arm, right? So instead you put a port in your arm. Like, you know, you go to the hospital, they have a port set up like that. You have the port in there so you're good to go for the entire day. That's how bad it got. So before I knew it, I was in a methadone clinic at 19 years of age. And they're telling me I shouldn't be there. You're too young for this. Back in the day, remember, this was very taboo. The people that are using heroin nowadays, 80% of them began with a prescription drug problem first. Back in my era, you were very stigmatized. You were part of the worst part of society. You were a junkie. And there was no Families Against Narcotics. There was no fight against stigma. It was, you hang out in the hood, you do crazy stuff, you're putting needles in your arm, we don't care what happens to you. It's also during the crack era in Detroit, which is a very different vibe down there. People talk about Detroit being dangerous. Like, I'm not an expert on Detroit, but I'll tell you this, when I was down there during that crack era, it was really, really bad. And it was really, really dangerous. People would just like disappear. Like you'd see somebody one day and they go, he disappeared. Like, how you disappeared? People just disappearing like that. So ended up in the methadone clinic. I was in really bad shape, and I went into the hospital. At one point I was doing 700 milligrams of methadone a day. 700 milligrams a day. Had to go to the hospital for 14 days. I was still going through withdrawals, still getting sick, still being miserable. And at some point I had to get additional help. I went to Brighton Hospital. So I went through the withdrawals from methadone for about 3 months, and I was still sick. Went back to heroin, back and forth, and years go by, different girlfriends, different enablers, back and forth. At one point, my family comes to my house for an intervention. This becomes the shortest intervention in American history. My mom and my family come into my office, in my condo. My mom begins reading the first paragraph of her intervention letter. And I say to her, I'm going. She goes, you can't leave. And I'm going. She misunderstood. I'm saying I'm going to go to rehab. We're done here. No reason to reading more of this letter. We're done. So I packed up my stuff, went to Brighton Hospital, and I got through the withdrawals the old-fashioned way. I already went through that Suboxone nonsense, had problems with that. So Dr. Mark was in there. He looks at me and goes, you got to take Suboxone. I said, no, I'm not taking it. I got a problem with Suboxone before. Did 9 months on there with the Suboxone maintenance. I said, that ruined my life. I can't get off that stuff. Withdrawals are horrible. Below 2 milligrams, I can't do it. He goes, well, you got to take Suboxone or kick you out of here. Dr. Mark, I have a Suboxone allergy. And he smiles. He goes, what do you got? I got this weird Suboxone allergy. I can't take the medication. I really want to. He goes, well played, Raj. He goes, no medications for you. I said, I know that. So for the first 3 days in that hospital bed, I was going through methadone withdrawals, heroin withdrawals, cocaine withdrawals, Valium withdrawals, some withdrawals, and alcohol withdrawals all simultaneously. I couldn't eat any solid food for 30 days. Obviously, my insurance only paid for 7 days and I was out of there. But everything changed at that point. I prayed something different, I never prayed before. I asked God to remove my desire to get high. It's the most powerful prayer anybody can make for themselves or someone they love. Asking God to remove the desire to get high. If you don't have an itch, you don't have to scratch at all. You don't want to have a cocaine itch over here and a heroin itch over there. You're constantly scratching. Talk about it in the 12-step program. They talk about the desire to use will be lifted if you follow the program, right? There's 12 promises, 12 steps. And so the goal is to have that craving removed. For me, it was about 100 days sober. I'm about to go to bed, lay my head in the pillow. I'm like, I forgot to think about getting high. That's deep, right? I forgot to think about getting high. I actually feel normal now. I have normal problems, normal worries. What am I going to have for breakfast? Why is this phone call coming in late? Never had that before. If anyone's ever used drugs and had a problem with it, one of the problems with drugs is the obsession to use, defined by cravings. People say, don't take those drugs. Your mind says, no, we got to take drugs. We got an angel on one shoulder and devil on the other shoulder. We had this committee going back and forth and arguing and fighting, and we feel miserable, right? So the idea is to get that craving to go away. And that happens through therapy, 12 steps, and abstinence as well. So I talked about what happened with Steve and the other guy. What ends up happening is these guys end up having a fallout. They get into this big disagreement. Like I said before, my friends carried machine guns and sold out large amounts of cocaine. But heroin was very, very taboo. As I began using heroin, I was cut off from my cocaine connections because that was unacceptable. You can smoke it, you can snort it, but as soon as you use the needle, you're a bad guy. So it was causing me problems. But Steve and Andy were having this really big fight. They owed each other money, and they want to kill each other. And so the only person they'll talk to is me. I have to go to this house and meet with Steve and Andy. They're both carrying automatic weapons on their person. And I got to be the guy that makes peace with them. Right? So I got to be funny, I got to be charming, I got to talk this stuff really fast. And so I'm doing all these things, and at the end of about an hour, everybody shakes hands, everybody has a great day, everyone walks away. I'm sweating profusely, right? So fast forward, after I became a therapist, did my first intervention ever, right? So I go to do my intervention on this really rich trust fund kid. His family owns a car dealership, and he's screaming at me, MFing me, calling me all kinds of names, saying he's not going to go to rehab. And as he's yelling at me, I'm looking at him, and there's no increase in my heart rate. I'm like, oh my God, after all the crazy stuff that I've done, all the crazy drug dealers that I've dealt with, this kid is not a problem at all. This is some stupid trust fund kid that's yelling at me about to go to rehab, doesn't even know it yet. You see my point? The same skill set that allowed me to be successful in bringing people together in the drug world also gave me the calm, cool, connected list to be a really good speaker when it comes to talking to somebody and to go into rehab and say, I know you're really upset right now. I know you don't want to do this right now. I know you want to delay, divide, distract. And so long story short, I'm very effective doing interventions because honest to God, there's no increase in my heart rate. You can shout at me, yell at me. I'm in the zone. We're going to go to rehab. You just don't know it yet. Sorry. 80% of the time, that's what happens. This is how it is.